what this forum is supposed to be all about is there was small group of people who got together and helped figure out, what the forms could or should be from now to the end of the year, roughly. And they noticed that Kat Turner, thanks be to God, has agreed to, starting next month, after Labor Day, periodically lead a forum to lead us through a new discernment, you know. And we've been talking about, okay, let us rest a while. And then after a while, figure out what our next mission is, our overarching big mission. It doesn't have to be as big as the last one, thank God. It doesn't have to be tear down your building and build a new church and affordable housing. But it does seem like we do better when we have a mission we're working toward. So I'm glad we will be doing that. But in preparation for that, this group said, wouldn't it be good to think about some of the things we've done in the past as a mission? And they said you should ask Francis and Bob Barnett to come and do this for them because they know a lot of the outreach and particular missions that we did in the past, which is true. They do. I've heard them at Bible study over the years talk about various things, and others talk about various things, but they're not actually Zoomers, if we could make a verb out of to Zoom. you know, and so what could we do instead was the question. And then the question really boils down to and it really matters more, what do we in our memory, what do we remember, us doing in the past? Not that we have to duplicate it, but it gives us a clue as to who we are as a community, And it's a good basis for which to begin thinking about what new to do, not to recreate the old necessarily, but to kind of put some ideas into the mix before we even get started. Now, obviously, if you've had an experience at another church where they had a mission and it isn't resurrection, you can talk about it too, because it also is something that God called somebody else to do. But the idea is, whether you've been here 1 or 2 years or 40 years, that, something caught your attention in the past. Something excited you, some mission, something you like to tell people about our parish. So basically, I'm hunting for that. And then how has your faith grown here as a result of all that? What we talk a lot about, what drew you here to resurrection, but what keeps you here more, and what do you look forward to in the future? That kind of thing, So however God moves you and you're willing to respond to that, I would love to hear your stories, that you might be willing to share. And Sam Adams gave me one. He said he doesn't do Zoom either, but he was here at 9 o'clock this morning, I guess. And he gave me one that many of you will know. And if it doesn't come up, I'll throw it into the mix later. So, did anybody have a story to share? What ministry or mission or thing that happened here do you really hearken back and remember about this place, and how might it have affected your faith life?
Well, I'll start. It's with parish care. And when you were saying in your questions, what you talked about, what stood out for you and what parishioners, I think of Frances Barnett and Laurie Thurgood. And when they went to see Orion once a week, and if they couldn't make it, they made sure someone else went to see her once a week. And they were faithful to her whole time there. And I think that at the nursing home, they respected her more because our parish reached out and sent someone there once a week to be with her. And that's what I remember.
Thank you. That's an excellent example. Because Envoy, where Orion isn't the greatest place to be. I know she looked forward to seeing those folks. Thank you for starting. Who's brave enough to pick up the gauntlet?
Well, I haven't been here all that long, but the thing that impressed me then and still does is the food pantry. I remember sitting in the conference room in the old church, and somebody said, well, let's start a food pantry. And it has grown exponentially and has benefited so many people over the years. And I'm so proud to be a part of it, just a small part, just to go pick the food up. But that to me is caring about other people in the community, and that to me epitomizes resurrection.
Thank you. Fair enough. Dick was next.
Yeah, Resurrection has always been a very welcoming place, and that I was fortunate that when I moved to Southern Towers, it happened to be the closest church. So that's where I started attending, but it was fantastic. And at the time we had a singles group, which was so welcoming. No other church had something like this. They were down to earth, and that I guess Lou and I are the lone survivors of it. But it just made everything more attractive. And I guess one of the main things, remembering, we were instrumental in the creation of Carpenter Shelter. So that's sort of the granddaddy. But always a giving church. We've always had great outreach.
So you touched on it. Resurrection was one of the big impetuses to gather a lot of other people to help, but to start Carpenter Shelter. And it interests me everywhere I go, Episcopal in the city of Alexandria, and some not Episcopal, they tell me how they started Carpenter Shelter. So everybody, we did it so well, everybody thinks they each did it, you know.
I think there's about 3 churches that led it. Jim Green was one of the people, but
yeah,
others have taken over.
And the singles group, you know who used to talk about that all the time was Peggy Green. I think she and Richard met that way.
No, they didn't.
No? Well, anyway, they used to talk about it a lot as
Right.
one of the things that they liked about our church from the
Peggy-
past.
Yeah, Peggy was after the singles group.
Yeah.
I came in about the time it was dying. All the people had been married off, and I came in at the very end of it.
Oh, so they succeeded.
Yes, a lot of them did. Yes,
Come to church and meet your mate.
exactly.
Hey, not a bad idea.
Yeah, that there was some of that when a lot of the folks in the singles group got married off. They ended up turning it into the Resurrection Society for Various People, so that some of the young marrieds could join in as well.
Resurrection Society, I'm writing this down, for various people.
Yeah, RSVP.
Oh, I hadn't tripped to that. You guys are so creative.
Another obvious thing is the preschool. That was one of the big things we did begin, became nationally known for it.
Who started that? Whose idea was it?
It was, I don't know, was it Jim Green's decision? Dennis and Susie, you were here back then. I just know that it was beginning and working when I came in, not 79. And it became such a big thing that, in fact, my accountant's daughter ended up there. And it was interesting how many people did go. And the other thing is people's children who were not needing of the services were part of it and had great experiences learning about how to deal with other people and their handicaps. So it was a very good thing.
I wish Ryan had gone there.
Yeah. I hear from a lot of people whose children went there now, because they ask me, well, where's the playroom? And I tell them, oh, it's over at Fairlington United Methodist Church, and they perk up. Our mission continues on. I think it might have been Jim Green who started it, but there's an audio tape he recorded when he retired that tells about somebody in the parish, and I don't remember.
Chitwood, Danny Chitwood.
Somebody who had a child.
It's the Chitwoods.
Yeah, that needed something like that. And that was Jim's understanding that God was prompting us to do something in that regard. That God gave us the gift of this child. And how could we be God's beloved community for that child? I'm using our modern words, but that's
But that's basically how it started.
And we could ask Barbara Langford because she's been big in it all along.
Yeah, she was also part of it. And ask Sam about it because I think their kids went there also.
Oh, yeah.
I think who else's children went.
Well, Sam's big deal, and I heard this story from many of you, but Sam tells me a lot about Sunday school at Goodwin House, where we had so many children, hundreds of children, he says, that we couldn't fit them in the building. And for Sunday school during the service, they had teachers, a whole gaggle of teachers who would take them all up to Goodwin House, and they would meet up there. And they had developed their own curriculum, which was one of those things he looks on in life as one of the really good things he's done. And if you know Sam, he's done a lot of really good things in life, including the Peace Corps and the like, But the whole idea that, there were 12 or so teachers for Sunday school who each week met with Jim and developed the curricula for that next week, and then took them up to Goodwin House, the kids up there, and, trained them up, taught them about Jesus. That's a highlight of his life. And that's quintessential resurrection. Not
Right.
so much that it's Goodwin House, but that, there was a need and we met it,
Another thing good about it being at Goodwin House is the kids gained grandparents and they made a lot of friends they liked going there because of the older people, and it was a reciprocal agreement because the people at Goodwin House loved having them come and being part of them.
Well, that leads me into one of the reasons Ray and I ended up at Resurrection, because 30 years ago we had been attending Grace Church in Georgetown. Ryan was about 5 years old, and they had a Montessori school there. And with the Montessori philosophy was that you keep pretty much repeating the same thing over and over again to the youngsters. And we could tell that Ryan was acting out. He was bored. And basically we were told that he wasn't, in so many words, that he wasn't welcome there because he was disruptive. And we knew people that had attended Resurrection. We knew it was Episcopal Church. And we also had heard that they had a very good Sunday school. And that's what about 30 years ago, that's what brought us to Resurrection. And he thrived in that particular Sunday school setting because they were doing a variety of creative things. And he needed that type of variety. So it was an excellent match for him, and it was a good match for us too. Obviously, we're still there after 30 years, so.
More than
Yeah. Thanks be to God. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So anyway, it turned out to be a good match for all of us, and we've just enjoyed the creativity, the ability to kind of jump in and do what we enjoy doing. There always seemed to be a space for some new activity to take place.
So, not to impede anybody who wants to talk, you'll get your chance here. But I just want to pause here a second. Tell you what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that we care for other people. We love doing things for other people. That we even love doing stuff for ourselves. I'm thinking about the singles thing here, but very creatively. Creativity is part of it. Maybe we get bored, not just Ryan, but we get bored, maybe. And, are willing to experiment and try things, and see what works. I'm not advocating we go back and do all these things necessarily. What I'm trying to do is gather up the impetus that underlies them and say, leave it for Kat to lead us to figure out how we use all that in the future. So I know that not everybody online here has been here nearly as long as some of the old timers, but still God is at work here. So I'm wanting to hear from new guys like you, Amanda, and you, Clem, if you can. I know there's no voice for you today, so maybe you can't. But, tell us what you experience here.
Well, I can I think I've told you all in forums and other things about how we ended up at Resurrection. You know, it just
God at work.
Oh, Susan Weber. Yes. You have to join our choir the first day out. But once we sort of got integrated into things, it was really amazing. Sharon always talks about it was the little engine that could, you know, with your discernment to start to do the Spire, and just there was so much going on, the food pantry, and you were so welcoming. It was just sort of a whole bunch of things. And then to instantly get involved and be able to go to the meetings, to the zoning committee and the different meetings that were scheduled, and be a part of that, and to be supportive of your vision of what to do, just like immediately put us in the midst. And that was really special. You know, some large churches, it takes a long time to kind of find your niche, and we found it right away, and it was great.
Yeah. And so you that's how God got you here, but then you're telling us how God kept you here.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, Dina and the choir, and and everybody's so crazy about Sharon, and so helpful for us, and caring. It's been a great experience for the last, I guess it's maybe 4.5 years is all that we've been there. But I feel like, pardon me?
It seems like a lot longer that you've been part of us.
No, because Layson just turned 5.
Yeah.
And we came up here in August of when he was born. You know, he was born in May. We came in August, and then I think it was the following winter that we decided to go ahead and find a church.
Well, God brought you here, and I'm so glad.
Thank you.
So it's a win-win, because we needed you.
We needed you guys
Both
too.
of you guys. You know,
Thank
your
you.
spirits.
Thank you.
So who else next?
I'll go now.
Yep.
I had been out of church for 30 years, I guess, except I was sort of looking around. I went to a Unitarian church for a year or two, and decided that wasn't it. And so then I decided to come back to church. And first I went to the Methodist Church, Fairlington, and they weren't friendly at all to me. And so I said, the next Sunday, I'm going to the Episcopal Church, because I'd already been here like 30 some years ago. And so I came, and you all were so friendly. And so I decided to stay, and I found, I guess I got the e-notes, and I saw what was going on, and you were having Bible study at Starbucks. So I thought, well, I can drive down there. I think I will. And I thought it was pretty neat. You were meeting in Starbucks. And so I liked that. And I didn't know much about the Bible, but I was inspired to learn. And so anyway, I love you all.
Yeah. You're a God. Everybody here is a God gift to each other. And I remember that Starbucks thing. I remember, you've heard this before, but I remember vividly when Martha Swearingen almost got us thrown out. Put on Martha, you know, she did good on that. She had a sign that said, "The world is not ending, ask us."
Yeah.
They decided no signs. So we're friendly, I guess.
Oh, yes.
That's what Mr. Tony, the Reverend Tony Lewis said.
Friendly and welcoming, and yeah.
Now, Tony Lewis is a priest, a retired priest, a faculty member of ETS. I know you know this, but he's moving into Goodwin House August 15th or 19th, something like that. And he said to me several times he was going to come here to worship after he moves into Goodwin House. So you Goodman House guys, keep your eyes out for Tony. You know, and if you don't see him in church, remind him we're right next door. But what impressed Tony, and I mentioned this before, but I'm going to put it back in the pot here, is he came to Kate Donnell's memorial service. The last thing we did on March 1st last year before the virus levied us. And he sat in the back and he wasn't wearing a collar. And I found out later that he had been Kate's priest for a while when she attended his church with her friend, the organist, who was the paid organist at that church. And so he was coming as much to pay his respect to Kate as he was hosting the organist to stay at his house overnight, you know, come and play the service. And he said to me afterwards, Jo, you have the friendliest church I've ever been at. He said people came and talked to me and they had no idea who I was. It wasn't because I was, you know, a seminary, whatever, a priest. No, it just, people came and talked to me, you know. He said, that just doesn't happen. And as a black man, he said, it really doesn't happen, you know. So that was kind of cool, seeing how that all played out. He was really impressed by that service, where you all poured your heart out in love to Kate, who was both our friend and our fellow parishioner and could be really difficult, you know, sometimes. So there you have it. I snuck in Tony's story and Kate's. Okay, Susie, yay.
You're muted.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. I think what made us stay at the church was the sense of community and the friendliness. After we were married, we were in Cincinnati for a few months and then moved here, and it was like 3 days before Christmas. And so I got the phone book out and found a church right behind Southern Towers. And so we went to Christmas Eve service, and people were friendly, and we went to church a couple times, and there was a real sense of community. And Jim Green came to visit us within about 3 weeks and wanted to know, you know, what we wanted with from church and what, you know, and what we were doing and all. And pretty soon you ended up having some sort of little job. And then came Shrinemont, which for me was a real game changer, because it was a weekend away. You got to know people more than saying good morning and some small chit chat. And then pretty soon you're involved in things. And at that point we were involved a lot with Alive. They had a food pantry, and we collected food weekly in the food closet. And then about once a month, somebody would pick it all up and drive it down to the food pantry. And also there was another program where we would drive people to the doctor or places they need or dialysis or something like that when they had no transportation. And that was you did that every so often, you know, on a schedule. And so there was always community involvement, plus the fact that we all knew each other rather than just walking in and out on Sunday morning. And I think that the sense of community is one of the most important things a church can have.
That's good.
Yeah.
One thing that I remember. I first came to Resurrection, I guess, when I was dating my first wife, because I wanted to go out to Sunday brunch with her. She said, well, it had to be after church. So I came to church with her.
Very clever.
and first of all, at that point, I was kind of, didn't really believe in organized religion or anything. So, but something about the Jim Green sermon and everything, it just seemed, I don't know, it just kind of hit a chord with me, the way he talked. And it wasn't real exclusive or whatever. And, anyway, and so, we started to come together, and we got married there and stuff. And then and I was just thinking back, I became involved in the Sunday school. And I remember those days we used to go to Goodman House, and we had kind of what they call open classroom and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with Jerry Cummings and Bob Burnett and a bunch of people. And it was really, yeah, like you said, it was a whole lot of, so I got really involved in doing the Sunday school and stuff, because my kids are growing up at the time. So it seemed like a natural segue, to be doing Sunday school. And I kind of try to get into the older classes as they got older. But I'm still. And then Gay started taking over Sunday school from me, but I still help her with it.
Yeah. I heard a compliment about it yesterday. I saw Cheryl Macbeth, and she was incredibly grateful for COVID Sunday school, I think she called it.
So Joe,
Mhm.
I think my experiences are somewhere in between, because I have to figure out how old Timmy Barnett is, because I ended up at Resurrection because I was having some issues with the Roman Catholic Church. And then when Dina and Kathy left, I used to sing with them in the choir, but I don't do choirs anymore because, one, I don't do robes. I was so hot today in church, and I thought I would have been in a puddle if I was in a robe today. And also, after my thyroid surgery, I can't figure out if I'm a soprano or an alto, and I can't stay on pitch. So I don't do the choir anymore. And I think like the second week after I was at the church, there was a woman, I think her name was Ainsley. She was leaving Resurrection and moving to South Carolina, and she was the Alive representative. And they were looking for somebody to be the Alive representative. And I says, well, what does it involve? And she goes, well, you only have to go to a meeting once a month. And I found out that it's what you make of it. But the reason I remembered Timmy Barnett is because the first Christmas service that I was at Resurrection, Timmy was in a Christmas pageant in his tiger Halloween costume. So I figure if you can let a tiger be in the nativity, this is a pretty interesting church. It was also nice to see a woman on the altar, and it's just much smaller than what I was experiencing at St. Anthony's. And I must admit that my first experience at Shrinemont was almost my last, because I didn't know it could rain that hard. So I'm still the Alive representative, and the church has always tried to do what it can to remain vital and helping people, and it's a community. I just can't imagine myself in some of the mega churches or even some of the Catholic churches, because they're just too big and they're just not a community to me.
So community is really important to you.
Yes.
Notice how we're struggling to figure out how to do it in the pandemic.
Yes.
Today was a little different. So do you mean Timmy Barnett, the father, or Timmy Barnett, the son?
The son.
The little redhead.
Oh, thank
Who's
God.
now-
Otherwise, you'd have been the alive representative for like 40 years, right?
Yes. Who was, you know,
He's quite, Timmy the younger is quite an adult these days.
It
Yes.
sure is.
he's what, over 6 feet tall now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
With
no.
long red hair.
Yes.
I read somewhere the other day that only 2% of the people in our country have red hair. He's one of them. And he's quite a musician. So I heard you basically, what you said fit in with everybody else. You were talking about the whole tiger in the nativity scene is sort of flexible and creative in a way,
Mhm.
you know, and community, community, community,
Mhm.
community, not just for ourselves, but for other people too.
Yeah.
So what are we missing? Anything? Yeah. Dennis?
Yeah, just wanted to add some to what had been said about community building. You know, I call it in-reach. I think that's really as important as outreach. They go together. Once you have a sense of community, you've got greater ability and willingness to extend outward. One of the things that I was involved with in the first year coming to Resurrection was dramatic group. We had somebody who was had great talent at organizing that sort of thing. And you know, we put on HMS Pinafore in the parish hall, 4 performances to a total audience of some 600.
Hmm.
And it got many people involved. There were, well, Jim's friend Gardner Van Scoek, whom some of you may know, was the star. He was the captain, and he was also administrator of Goodwin House at the time. And, you know, that had people involved with the chorus, making costumes, making and painting scenery, the whole shebang. It got dozens of people involved. And there were, you know, other dramatic productions over the years. You know, they got scaled down and gradually. We had some chancel dramas that involved just a very few people. Other type of activity. I've been involved with the choir for quite a while, and I find great great satisfaction from that, and I find it a very close group. You know, but those who've died, I've still affected by some of those as much or more than family members.
Yeah.
I just you know, think that kind of collective activity, you know, whether it's large scale or small, whether it, you know, open classroom, collective activity in singles group or RSVP groups, you know, that sort of thing that builds the community, makes it stronger to extend, and makes it more attractive to grow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and of course, I'll add on to Susie what she had to say about Shrine Mont.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly for us. That's been an incredibly important experience. And when we recently dropped off our grandkids for camp there, to see the multi-generational impact that place has on people was awesome. You know, people who'd camped, people who'd been on staff, people who'd been in Shrine Mont one way or another. You get 3 generations or so reminiscing about their lives together.
Yeah. I've been wondering, by the way, and I'll just raise it here. I've been wondering, because Shrine Mont keeps asking us to figure out ways to help support it financially during the pandemic, right? So I was thinking about asking them to ship us a parcel of their apple butter things, and we could sell them at a little profit and give the money to the food pantry, and then we would have apple butter, a taste of Shrine Mont. I don't know if that appeals to anybody, but keep thinking about ways to connect with
Or the
it.
pecan pie.
Yeah.
Pecan pie, ooh.
Or
You
they're,
know, who used to ask for that was John Hodges. And
And
I
Sam-
didn't know, but about 8 different of you were bringing him pie.
Sam Adams loves it too.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Who doesn't? Well, not everybody does, but I do. And I can't have it. You know, it's terrible. Well, so Frances Barnett did tell me a story or two. She told me there was a State Department woman who had some kind of connection with Guatemala. And you all sent clothes down to Guatemala to meet a need they had down there. So it's sort of like the pop-up culture of whatever the need of the moment is, that God gets somebody's attention and they organize some kind of help, for it. She also told us in Bible study quite a few times about an immigrant family the church sponsored.
The Barnetts particularly.
Yeah. And, just things like that through the ages.
Well, I was involved with the the Guatemala thing, and it got to the point where we, other than exchanging and sending clothes down, it was Sue Patterson who had once been a member of our church,
Right.
and she was a consul general in Guatemala. And so she, I don't know who had the idea, it must have been her, to start sending us crafts, Guatemalan handmade crafts that we could sell at the church, and the money that we made we'd send back to her, and she would distribute it to various social needs. And there was a city dump outside of Guatemala City, and she was giving money to a group there, and it was actually a little Episcopal church that was being established there. And they erected a structure, and they had an altar, and they had altar linens. And then there was a lady that had a school for children on the edge of the dump. And she was teaching, and we sent enough money that they could buy a pump that could bring water into the school, rather than her taking the truck down to a water source and having to load it up. She was providing meals. And at one point, Ann Genders, who's since passed away, but she and I took a trip down there and saw for ourselves, how the money had been distributed and the good that it was doing. So that gave me a real connection with Guatemala.
Wow. So it's right along the same line as the other stuff. Somebody who saw a need and shared it, and the community responded.
Yeah, we could just jump in and do this, and Jim would encourage it. And when the interest died down, he said, well, this is something that the church does on a regular basis, and we just move on to the next thing. And I thought he had the background to be able to tell me it's time to move on to something else.
Yeah.
At one time, there was a picture or two of a couple of Haitian children that had been adopted, I don't know, by Resurrection or the Episcopal Diocese in general. Whatever happened to that program?
No, that one.
Oh, I think that was I'm not sure what left. It was a general, I don't know whether it was a diocesan.
No.
It was an overall program with quite a number of churches participating in that. I think we sponsored one. I remember when we were attending Al-Anon over at
Grace Church.
At Grace, they were sponsoring two or three or something like that, whatever. And so, I don't know who was running the program right offhand, but I know it was a larger program in which churches participate. And it may not have been Episcopal. It might have been a larger joint church program.
Mm. Yeah.
It's the Haitian Micah Project. It was begun by a faculty member at VTS who was Haitian, a Haitian priest.
Okay.
And spun out into a non-government, nonprofit organization that the secretary for was a member of Grace Church in Alexandria. But it wasn't, they got as many churches, Episcopal churches throughout the country as could help. And they really did a lot of good right after the earthquake down there. And that was, since then it's kind of died down. but at the time, it did a lot of good. So I'm still hearing the theme, you know. And what about projects that weren't necessarily outreach related? Were there any of any other kind? We heard one that Linda Goff started with, which was parish care kind of related, which is just slightly different than food pantry and that sort of thing. But how about inside worship? Were there any worship related endeavors? I know you all tried a Saturday night service at one point.
We had a prayer group that met every Monday night. There were about 4 or 5 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually, dwindled down to just a couple. And at that point, we stopped that. But it went on for several years.
And now we have Complin.
But also we had, at one point during the 60s, we had, or actually must have been during the 70s, we had folk mass like once a month, because there were several players that kind of fancy themselves guitarists or whatever. And once a month, about half a dozen of us, and I even had an old pair of bongo drums. We would provide the music and maybe do a little skit, but that would be the service instead of the priest doing a service. So you're talking about inside the church. That was one thing we used to do.
Yeah. So I didn't know you played the bongos for it. I heard about folk mass, but this is the first time you've divulged your drum playing.
Now I'm not quite as good at it.
And I like this without the priest thing. You guys could really go take off. Because, Saturday night worship isn't in our cards. Just saying. No.
Yeah, well, this was actually on a Sunday.
This is on Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, so it gave Jim, one weekend off that he didn't have to preach.
Oh, you mean on Sunday morning?
Yeah.
Wow. I can't imagine that now. Can you? I see some yeah and no.
But that was at the time. At the time, things were a little.
Yeah, it was different, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. So I don't know. Go ahead.
We didn't always have the Maundy Thursday service and dinner. That started, I don't know when, but it wasn't there when we first started coming to church. So that was a new thing.
The prayer book, the current prayer book in 78, 79, started that as a service, the Triduum, the Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and the Vigil.
Yeah, and since I used to be
bless you and thank you.
Since I used to be Jewish, and Jim said, "Oh, it's natural. It's not much. You just have to follow this little booklet." Hey, but then there's a lot of spaces in the booklet where you have to tell a story, and it just says tell the story. And I was trying to remember, the story of Passover off the top of my head, so I had to develop, and then it became, once a year thing.
It's like, do this little thing here for the next 80 years. That's our failing, right? At Resurrection. It's like, okay, you did it. Now you said you would. Now you got to do it forever until stop. And that can be okay if you're willing.
Yeah, and that was kind of interesting,
Yeah, and fun and good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we missing? Any stories pop to your mind that we should think about?
Well, one element I think hasn't been mentioned too much is when we have our collective activities, when we try to build our community, you need to make a place for fun. It's not all earnest worship services. There needs to be the fun element in the community as well.
Yes.
What? You don't want a church all the time? Oh, Lord. I hear you. I'm just laughing because, Shrinemont was a perfect place for that, for getting away and having fun and connecting with people. And, there was a worship service too, but that wasn't the point really, to just be in church all weekend. When I was a kid, my father's Methodist church would go to camp meeting for 2 weeks in the summer, and it was church all the time, you know, and that wasn't very motivating for us. Especially when they had evangelists, and the youth evangelists would come around and had a ruler. If you were sitting close to within 12 inches of somebody of the opposite gender, you would get moved. It was actually measured. Think about that. Ooh. Wow.
Oh,
Doesn't sound Episcopal, does it?
No.
No. Amanda.
One of the things that I miss, but that I try whenever I don't have to take care of the children or Sharon or whatever, I really like Compline. One of the reasons I like Compline is because I really miss Evensong. And I don't know if you can do Evensong abbreviated, or if you can do it without a choir and without all the other bells and whistles that come with Evensong. But that service to me is just so peaceful and nice.
Yeah, it really is.
But the other thing is, I can't wait for us to get back to the socials, the things that we did, miniature golf, and I don't remember all of the things that we did, but I can't wait for this pandemic to be over so we can get back to, like Dennis said, having fun.
We got about 10 minutes left, so let's think out loud here with each other, because I noticed that we really liked talking to each other, seeing each other, of course, at the picnic we did at Fort Ward, because it was a while since we've been able to fellowship and sit down and talk to people. Now, who knows the direction the pandemic's going in right at the moment, other than bad. Even in Alexandria, it's enough that we're back in masks, and who knows if we'll be able to sing next week. We'll just see. But having said all that, outdoors is a different deal. Outdoors is so much safer. And other than Fort Ward Park, which we could go back to, assuming we could get a day as nice in weather as when we were last there. Are there other ideas of places that we could go outdoors or wherever, where we could be together and do something fellowship related? Because I'm starting to collect your ideas.
Joe, I was going to speak to you about this next week, but one of the things I think with the pandemic, it's probably going to get worse before it's better. But I'd like to be able to meet outside on Sundays where it's safe to be in group, socially distanced, and maybe jointly listen to the service. And I wondered whether we could go back to Wilderness and do something like that, where we'd have a bunch of people jointly listening to the service outside.
You mean here or somewhere?
No, I'm saying back where we used to have
The seminary.
The seminary, and that we would listen, we'd be jointly listening as a group to the service, but we'd be outside where it's safe for people to be together. And if we wanted to have food after that, we could have a picnic, whatever we wanted, but it's just a means of safely getting together. And right now that's only outside.
Right. So I'm sure we could go back to the seminary and do that. We'd have to haul everything, but we could do that. I'm sure they'd let us. We'd have to ask. But
yeah.
So the seminary's one.
Right, but I'm saying you could have the service just as you're doing now, and we'd have a group together jointly listening to the service that's.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I got it. I just missed that piece. So you'd be listening online, but together with people.
Correct.
Right. And hopefully, I heard after the service today that the camera ran out of juice in the middle of the 10:30 service, so it dropped offline. Well, what a bummer that is.
Mm-hmm.
And at the issue there is somebody forgot a piece of equipment, and these things happen. But it seems like it's been happening for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and that's terrible. I'm so sorry.
Well, the thought occurred to me in regard to that grassy area that we have, and also the paved area, the memorial garden, why we couldn't have some folding tables set up out there with our folding table, with the folding chairs, and we could either sit around a table or we could just bring the folding chairs outside. Of course, it would have to be a nice day, obviously, but it would be right there at the church. I think we need to use that space and start using it because it's a nice space.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a nice space, and our parking lot's nice too. Except it's raining right now.
Today wouldn't be.
Today wouldn't be good. So it's almost like, you know, you can't put a tent up in the Memorial Garden, but I was thinking about way back when we were doing our grand opening. I was thinking about what if we put a permanent tent cover over the space between us and the other building, you know. But the reality is you can't get that much of us out there. But this side would be really nice. So there's an idea. Keep thinking about all that. Even if you don't have an idea now, maybe you'll be somewhere. You'll say, wait a minute, that's nearby, and that could be a place we could go. You know, there are other parks, but they're further away than Fort Ward. Fort Ward's an option of just repeating the obvious, you know, and going back there. Who knows what you might think of? Because I'm with you. I want to see the whole community together and fellowship. I mentioned before, toward the end of our time at VTS, just before the pandemic hit, we were getting a little tired of all that togetherness, you know, and then suddenly we didn't have it anymore. Oops. Now we're at the other extreme of that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know. I thought about asking, and they're very gracious. They would let us. I thought about asking Emmanuel on the Hill to let us use the outside. You know, they have a great space behind their building to picnic, to worship. Anybody else? Thank you. A lot of these stories we've heard at some point or other together, you know, but it's good to gather them all together and to think about what they mean as a group. And like I said, not to go backwards in time. We can't do that. We're a different congregation now than we were before. Older, if nothing else, you know. but you know, the core of who we are is still our gift. It's still what makes us special, what makes us who we are. So think on these things, and you know, maybe when we begin discerning, there'll be a way that we can see how who we are fits into what it is that God is calling us to do next, because God is always calling us, whatever it is, you know. Hopefully it won't be as big as the last time, but it might be, you never know. And if so, we will respond. Last conversation, anybody have a last burning, input? Yep, Barbara Bancroft, I love to hear from you.
This is a story that lets us know that, yes, we're doing the right thing. I have a friend at Goodwin House whose apartment looks out across toward the church. And she says every evening between 7 and 9 o'clock, she hears the children playing. And she hears them calling to each other, and she hears them laughing. And she says it's like a virtual hug, and it gives her such joy.
Oh, wow.
She's just hugged us. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was one of the complaints some of them had, that they would be hearing it. So I'm glad it was the other side, the good side.
Well, you heard some of you who were at one of the services today. I shared that I actually saw a child from the Spire with one of the balls we gave him last week, bouncing it in up the street into our parking lot and playing, there with someone else with it. So it was really cool.
Good.
Thank you, Barbara, for that.
Yeah, that was nice.
Wow. All right. Now, one last thing just before we go. Because Kat, who's recovering, by the way, from her knee replacement surgery, she's in some pain. She can't take the OxyContin because it makes her dizzy. And so she has to decide whether she wants to hurt or be sick and hurt. So pray for Kat and, be there for her. But she's not doing the newsletter anymore. And there's a new issue coming due. And so today would be the deadline, but we're just now beginning to think about it. So if any of these stories inspired you to write a short little article for the newsletter about something going on in our church now, or some response you have to our church now, send it to me and send it to office@welcometoresurrection.org. I'd love to gather them up and, use it, because I've got a feeling there's a space in our coming issue that's going to be just big enough for whatever you send. Thank you. And thank you for coming today. Let's pray our way out of here. The Lord be with you.
And also,
So with
you.
you.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for this day, for this time together, fellowship of a sort, not the kind we crave. And so we ask you, keep us safe. Keep all those we know and love safe, and keep everybody else safe too, despite our desires to not be fettered in any way. Help us to help each other. Help us to hear what you would have us hear today, and distill it in such a way that we hear what you're calling us to do next. We ask these things in your name, giving you great thanks for this time together. Amen.
Amen.
And
Thank you all.
Have safe weeks.
Yeah, and next week we're going to hear from a VTS person about the reparations that they came to, because it's a thing of interest to many of you. How did they decide to do that? And what does it mean, and that sort of thing. So somebody from VTS and Reverend Susan will be leading forum next week. Go in peace.
Bye.
Bye.